All right, in this video we're going to do lessons 7 and 8. Lesson 7, we're only going to do a small portion of the lesson. It's working with proving the Pythagorean theorem. We're not going to go over that too much, but here is a good comic. We talked about hypotenuse in the previous video, so I just thought it was funny. Here we go. If you'll notice, we have skipped ahead to activity 3, and we're going to find the unknown side lengths in these right triangles. We'll do the one on the left first. Again, always start out by writing down the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember that it only works for right triangles, but both of these are, so we're good to go. I'm also going to label my side lengths. I know that the two legs need to be A and B. It doesn't matter which one's A or which one's B, as long as the two legs are A and B, and the hypotenuse is C. And I'm going to start filling in what I know. I know that A is 5. I know that B is 2, and I don't know C. So I'm just going to call that, in this case we're calling it X. It doesn't really matter. But I keep simplifying. 5 squared is 25, plus 2 squared, which is 4, equals X squared. And I keep simplifying, and I get 29 to be X squared. And so I know that to just have X alone would be the square root of 29, because the square root of 29 times the square root of 29 would get me 29. And so that side length is going to be the square root of 29. Okay, in the next triangle, I've labeled sides A, B, and C. Remember, A and B are the legs connected to your right angle. C is opposite that. So in this case, we don't know one of the legs. I start out by writing my Pythagorean theorem and fill in what I know. A is going to be the square root of 8. B is just y in this case, and C is going to be 4. And from here, I keep on simplifying. The square root of 8 squared is going to be 8. I don't know what y is. And then 4 squared is 16. Now this is like an equation where I have to get everything together on one side. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. I get y squared equals 8. And so I know then that y needs to be the square root of 8. I'll write it over here. Y is the square root of 8. The big difference between these is that in one triangle, we were solving for the hypotenuse, which was C, and in the other triangle, we were solving for a leg, which was B. You still start out with the Pythagorean theorem, you still use it the same way, but it's just a little bit different when you get to the solving the equation piece. Now we're on to lesson 8, and we're going to keep working on finding the unknown side lengths. We are going to skip ahead to activity 2, and the first thing you're going to do is label all the hypotenuses with C. Go ahead and do that. Start again when you're ready. So this is where the C should be placed for the hypotenuse on each triangle. B is not a right triangle, so it does not have a hypotenuse. Only right triangles do. And remember that the hypotenuse is always opposite or across from your right angle. Okay, if we're going to find C in number 1 here, always start by writing your Pythagorean theorem, and then let's fill in what we know, and we will figure out what C is. Square root of 10 squared is just 10. Square root of 40 squared is just 40. And so I get 50 to equal C squared, which means just C is going to equal the square root of 50. And that idea goes back to when you had the area of the square, and then you found the side length of the square. Same idea as to why C is the square root of 50. We can also just leave this as the square root of 50. We don't need a decimal approximation at this point. So just leave it as a square root of 50 and don't worry about getting a decimal. In number 2, I labeled where my A and C are, and then I notice that I'm trying to find a leg, or B, and I'm going to fill in what I know to the Pythagorean theorem. I still don't know B, and I keep simplifying here. I need to get everything on one side. And so I get B by itself to just equal the square root of 14. Again, just leave it as a square root. When you're doing a problem like number 3, make sure that you draw a picture to go with it and label everything. It's going to make things so much easier. Start by writing the Pythagorean theorem and go ahead and figure it out. Okay, so here I filled in what I knew. I labeled my legs as A and B. I had 2.4 squared plus 6.5 squared. I used a calculator. These are the numbers I got. So I end up with 48.01 equals c squared, which means just c is going to equal the square root of 48.01. If you want to get a decimal on that, that's perfectly fine, but you can just leave it as a square root or an irrational number. Again, on number 4, definitely draw a picture and be careful of your labeling. The hypotenuse needs to be 1/3, and then one of the legs is going to be 1/4, and so you are solving for the other leg. Okay, so I've written out the Pythagorean theorem. I've filled in what I knew. A is 1/4. I need to square that, plus b squared is going to equal 1/3 squared. And I keep on working this down. Subtract 1/16 from each side. I'm going to go up here. I'm running out of room. And so I get b squared is going to equal 0.04861 repeating. And so b is going to equal the square root of that. And we can just leave it at that. It's a crazy number, but that would be the side length of b. Now number 5 here is kind of a cool puzzle. We want to figure out x, but in order to do that, we need to figure out this leg first. And so we can use the left side of the triangle to figure out that one, and then we can figure out x on the right side. Okay, so I'm working on the left side of the triangle here. I've labeled my sides A, B, and C, filled in what I knew. So I have 5 squared, that's 5 was A, plus B squared equals the square root of 34 squared. And so this is what I have right now. I need to get my B squared by itself, and then I get B squared equals 9. And so I know that B is going to equal the square root of 9, which is 3. Okay, so now I've relabeled things. I know that b is 3. I've labeled my sides A, B, and C, written out the Pythagorean theorem. I'm going to fill in what I know and solve for side A, or in this case, x. Okay, so I filled in what I knew. X is, or A is side x, B was 3, C was the square root of 18. I square what I need to, so I have x squared plus 9 equals 18. And I get my x squared by itself, and I get x squared equals 9, which means just x would equal the square root of 9, which is 3. So it's kind of like a piece to a puzzle, but we figured out that x was 3. Good work making it through all of this, guys. If you need extra help on it, please let me know. Also, the homework help video goes through the entire lesson as well, so you can use that to get another explanation if you would like.